Before we get into today's game, I want to talk about the sponsors for my channel. Card Conduit is the best way to sell your unused Magic cards. Whether you've got a box of unsorted bulk, or a complete and alphabetized set, there's a great option for everyone. With a payout averaging 19% better than using any one buy list, and that's after fees are applied, you can rest assured you'll get the best bang for your buck. And if you use the affiliate link in the description below, or the promo code MTGMUDSTA, you'll save 10% off their fees. And 401 Games, Canada's one-stop shop for trading cards, board games, and hobby supplies. And if you use the promo code MTGMUDSTA, your first purchase of MTG sealed and singles will be 5% off. And Dragon Shield, the strongest sleeves for your strongest deck. So be sure to use the code MUDSTA or the affiliate link down below to save 5% on your next order. Today's patron shoutout goes to Wes Allen. Thanks Wes for supporting me through Patreon. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today we have a melding of the playgroups, with one person from each different group joining me. In today's game, I have Mark playing my Jolly Balloon Man deck, keeping Sacred Foundry, Mountain, Deflecting Palm, Reflections of the Mirror Breaker, Spirited Companion, and Elegant Parlor. Fred is playing Ruric Thar, keeping Old Gnawbone, Snow-Covered Mountain, Cinderglade, Reflecting Pool, Arbor Elf, Incubation Druid, and Nyx Bloom Ancient. Arja is playing Xantcha, keeping Blightning, Terminate, Swamp, 3 Mountains, and a Rocky Tar Pit. Lastly, I am playing my Lord of the Pain deck, keeping Swamp, Dragonskull Summit, Sign in Blood, Rakdos Signet, the Black Gate, Defiler of Instincts, and a Massacre Worm. Arja wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws and plays a tapped Rocky Tar Pit. Fred just has a Snow-Covered Forest return, and he taps it to cast Arbor Elf. I play my Black Gate tapped and pass to Mark. Mark also has a tap land with an Elegant Parlor. He surveils a basic and puts it to his graveyard. Arja just draws, plays a mountain, and passes. Fred has a Snow-Covered Mountain for turn, and he pays 2 mana for an Incubation Druid, shipping the turn to me after that. I've got a Swamp, and I pay 2 for a Rakdos Signet. Mark's got a Plains for turn, and he casts a Spirited Companion, drawing a card as it enters. At the end of turn, Arja cracks his Rocky Tar Pit to go and find a Swamp. Arja draws and plays a Mountain. He then casts Xantcha and gives her to Fred. Fred's turn has a Cinderglade coming in, which comes in untapped, and he then plays out a Wood Elves. He goes to find a Forest card, and puts to field a Snow-Covered Forest. He then uses the Arbor Elf to untap the Forest, and taps the rest of his mana and Dorks to help cast Domir Raid. He then upticks the Planeswalker, looking at his top card. Since it's not a creature, it stays there, and he moves to combat. He swings Xantcha at me, and I take 5 commander damage from Arja's commander. I draw for turn, and play my Dragonskull Summit. It comes in untapped, and I then cast Sign in Blood, taking 2 to draw 2. Mark's got a Mountain for turn, and he then brings out the Jolly Balloon Man. He then hits Arja for 1 with a Companion, and he passes turn after that. Arja's got a basic, and he's then able to cast a Gutter Snipe and pass it to Fred. Fred's land for turn is a War Room, and he upticks Domri again to look at his top card. Once more doesn't go to hand, and Fred decides to go hard, slamming out a Nyx Bloom Ancient. Going to combat, Xantcha hits Mark this time for 5, and Fred passes to me. I've got a Graven Cairns for turn, and I then pay 5 mana to cast Lord of Pain. With nothing else, I pass to Mark. Mark draws and plays a Plains. He casts a Reflection of the Mirror Breaker, and I deal 3 to Fred with the Lord of Pain trigger. With the Saga coming in, Mark then makes a 2/2 Shaman. He then activates the Balloon Man, making a copy of the token, and he goes to combat. He hits Fred for 1 with the Balloon copy, making a treasure token, and he then passes and sacrifices it. Arja's got a Swamp for turn, and he casts a Bitter Feud, which gives me a Lord of Pain trigger, and I deal 5 to Fred. The feud then comes in, and Arja pairs Fred and I with it, so whenever one of us takes damage, we'll take double if it's from each other, and having stirred the pot, he then passes turn. Fred draws and upticks Domri, revealing Wandering Archaic and puts it to hand. He plays a snow-covered mountain, and then casts Ruric Thar. I get a Lord of Pain trigger, and I deal 6 to Arja this time. Fred then casts the Wandering Archaic, and he's got a mana floating still. He then needs only tap a few lands to help cast Old Gnawbone. Going to combat, Xantcha goes at me, and the Nyxbloom and Wood Elves go at Arja. Moving to blocks, Arja chumps the Nyxbloom, and I block Xantcha with the Lord of Pain. The commanders trade, and Arja then takes 1 from the Wood Elves, with Fred making 1 treasure token. He then passes to me after that. I draw for turn, and play a tapped Smoldering Marsh, and then slam with the fastest Plasma Sack that I just drew. Ruric Thar triggers, and I get to take 6 damage, which is doubled because of Bitter Feud to 12. With the board wipe on the stack, Fred activates War Room, losing 2 and drawing a card. The board is then wiped. After that, I then cast Defiler of Instincts and ship the turn. Mark draws and adds a second lore counter onto his saga. This allows him to discard 2 and draws 2 from the ability, and he then plays a mountain. Mark then casts an Arcane Signet, and he then plays out Perforos. With nothing else, he passes. Arja's got a swamp for turn, and brings back out Xantcha. He gives her to me, and passes after that. Fred plays a snow-covered forest, and then once more casts Ruric Thar. He then upticks Domri, hitting and revealing an Oran Frostfang, which he puts to hand, and then passes turn. I tap 3 mana and lose 2 life to the Defiler's ability to make 1 red mana impermanence effectively Phyrexian, and cast Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls. I then swing Xantcha at Fred, who blocks with Ruric Thar. They trade because Bitter Feud, and I then pass turn. Mark draws and adds the final counter to his reflections, exiling it and returning it as a reflection of Kiki Jiki, which deals 2 to each opponent because of Perforos seeing it come in. Mark then plays a Thought Vessel, while Arja waxes poetic about why he's being targeted.
I mean, you used Teamwork to kill my commander.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Teamwork and what I believe was 8 mana.
Mark then recasts the Jolly Balloon Man, dealing 2 to each of his opponents because of Perforos, and he then plays a Sacred Foundry, taking 2 so it comes in untapped. This triggers my Valgavoth, and I draw a card and add a +1/+1 counter to the demon. Mark then uses the Sacred Foundry to activate the Balloon Man, making a copy of Reflection of Kiki Jiki, which deals another 2 to his opponents. Moving to combat, Mark swings the balloon copy at Domri Raid to keep him off the ultimate. With nothing else, Mark passes and sacrifices the balloon. Arja draws and plays a mountain, and then casts Tiny Bone Joins Up, which has each opponent discarding a card. He then plays his own copy of Rakdos Signet and passes. Fred draws and uptakes Domri, revealing an Ilsean Caryatid, which he puts to hand. Fred then plays out an Oran Frostfang, and then the Caryatid, and then passes to me. I pay 6 mana and 2 life to recast Lord of Pain, and I use my Defiler trigger to deal 1 to the Reflection. Going to combat, I swing Valgavoth at Domri, and the Defiler goes at Mark. Before moving to blocks, Arja casts Curtain's Call, and I have the Lord of the Pain trigger, deal 6 to Mark. Arja's Curtain Call targets the Reflection and Jolly Balloon Man, and with that on the stack, Mark activates the Reflection, making a balloon copy of the Balloon Man, and we all take 2. Mark and Domri then take their hits, and I pass turn. Mark casts an Ashnod's Altar, and I deal 3 to Arja. Mark then passes, and during his end step, Arja uses Terminate to take out the Frostfang, which allows me to deal 2 to Mark with the Lord of Pain. Arja starts turn 7 off by casting a Red Sun's Twilight and putting 4 into the X. This gets me a Lord of Pain trigger, and I deal 6 to Mark's face. Arja then blows up all of Mark's mana rocks, his altar, and my signet, and passes turn after that. Fred draws and uptakes Domri, but doesn't reveal anything, so it stays on top. He then recasts Ruric Thar, and I deal 6 to Arja, and Fred then passes to me. I draw for turn, and pay 2 life again to help cast Fear of Burning Alive, using the Defiler's ability. I get a Lord of the Pain trigger, dealing 6 to Fred, which becomes 12 because of Bitter Feud. I also get a trigger from casting a red permanent with the Defiler, dealing 1 to Mark. The Fear then enters, dealing 4 to my opponents, which actually means 8 to Fred. I then go to combat and swing Valgavoth and the Defiler at Mark, and the Lord of Pain goes at Arja. Mark decides he doesn't like this plan, using Deflecting Palm, and will have me take the damage from Valgavoth instead. He does take 6 from Ruric Thar's trigger though, and I also get a Lord of the Pain trigger for the spell. This has me dealing 2 to Arja. I then take 5, Mark takes 4, and Arja takes 5 commander damage. We're all really beaten up at this point, and I then pass to Mark. Mark draws and plays a Plains. He plays out a Restoration Angel, which deals 2 to each of his opponents, taking Fred and I out. He then realizes he should have cast Balloon Man instead, and swaps it out for the same effect, but this way he can attack Arja for 1. He does so, and passes turn after that. Arja untaps, and draws, and plays Liliana the Veil. He downticks her once or out to make Mark sacrifice a creature. He then casts a Blightning, dealing 3 to Mark, and making him discard basically his entire hand. He then passes turn. Mark draws, revealing off the top of Boros Signet, which he casts, and passes turn. Arja draws, and just passes after that. Mark draws, and plays a Felwar Stone, and passes. Arja untaps, and I demonstrate my abilities of Foresight, predicting his draw.
Soul Ring. Soul Ring is one additional.
Well, Arja,
If I have Dark Ritual.
play Mana Crypt.
Dark Ritual. Play Mana Crypt. You did this! You did this!
I just,
He hits the Soul Ring, and then casts Thrill of Possibilities, discarding a card to hopefully draw 2 and an answer. He doesn't, and he casts Into the Fire, doing the same but bottoming the cards instead of discarding. He puts 1 on bottom, draws 2, and then just passes turn. Mark draws a Circuit Mender, which he casts, and as it comes in, kills Arja with a Perforos trigger. Game review time. This game was about 53 minutes and 29 seconds, and once more I am just getting absolutely wrecked with the daycare colds that are coming our way. The road to recovery is long and full of a lot of phlegm, but hopefully you can get through it, as I did with this game. Today's game was great, although I'm pretty sure I say that about every game that I do, but I've really been enjoying the Duskmourn Commanders. They seem to be very impactful, and I'm just really enjoying all of the red in them. The Jolly Balloon Man's great, as it allows me to make tokens, which I love to do, and the balloons are kind of funny. You can use them for enter the battlefield, on attack, and on death triggers, and there's a lot of fun ways to build them. The Lord of Pain is just awesome. If you ever want to speed up a game, play the Lord of Pain. Typically it'll run a lot of hate cards, not to mention you're just going to start blasting people and opponents in the face as soon as they start casting spells. I think Arja's Xantcha deck performed a lot better this game, although it still ran into the same problem that all Xantcha's decks have, which is when you're down to your last opponent, you never really want to cast your commander. Much like my Lord of Pain deck sped things up, Fred's Ruric Thar deck certainly did as well. Although I don't think it triggered as much as the Lord of Pain, it still added up quite quickly, with me taking 12 because of Bitter Feud, and I think Mark took about 12 to the face as well from multiple triggers. It was also fun to play in a pod that had no blue. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, but it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.